Michigan finally has their new head coach. Kyle Whittingham has officially become the new leader of the Michigan Wolverines. But is he a great hire? Is he a bad hire? Somewhere in between? How does he rank up versus the other new hires in college football? Versus Lane Kiffin at LSU? Versus James Franklin? Alex Golesh? Today at Tailgate Chats, we're going to talk about all the new hires. We're going to give them some grades and see who was the best and the worst hires for each school. And yes, we're going to go over every school with the new hire because we don't just cover the SEC and the Big Ten here. We cover every school that deserves to be covered. Keep in mind, when I give these grades out, I'm going to give them relative to the school and what they could have gotten. So for example, obviously someone like Colorado State is not going to get the same candidates as LSU. So just making sure we're on the same page there because I know some people are going to get mad about these grades. So I said I'd start with Michigan, and that's where we're starting. Kyle Whittingham, like I said, is the new Wolverines head coach. And this is a phenomenal hire. Even forgetting about the football part of it, Michigan went from a national championship with Harbaugh to him leaving to the NFL, partly because it's an upgrade, but mainly, I think, because of the scandal of the cheating. Then they brought in Sharon Moore, who was supposed to be that stability, and that whole Sharon Moore incident happened. If you don't know what that is, you're either living under a rock or you don't follow college football, which you won't be watching this video if you don't want to follow college football. So they are desperate to get a good stability culture. I'm going to do things the right way kind of guy. And Kyle Whittingham is that exactly. He brings discipline, he brings structure, he will create a perfect culture. He brings an edge to the team also. He's not like just some pushover. He will help maintain that recruiting base that Michigan has historically gotten. He recruited extremely well at Utah. Now he has even more resources. The two biggest concerns are his age. This isn't a 10+ year hire. He's 66. So this is not a long-term deal. They're going to have to go through a coaching search again. Maybe it'll come from one of his staff members, but at least now they have some time to do it. The other concern is he hasn't really been winning big games recently. He's struggled in bowl games. He's struggled against the top ranked teams. Now, again, he has way more resources now at Michigan, but if you're Michigan, I know you expect to win immediately. But in the end, I give this an A+. He is the perfect type of coach to bring in after Moore and even Harbaugh. He will maintain their style while bringing in some uniqueness as a new staff, but he will bring that tough defense, tough running style. Kyle Whittingham was a home run hire for Michigan, especially given the circumstances. They had to do this coaching search after every other team got their guy. So A+ for Michigan. Over at LSU, we have Big Daddy Lane Kiffin, who everyone kind of knew he was going here. There was some possibility he would stay at Ole Miss, but he ended up choosing LSU. We all know what Lane Kiffin is good at. He's great. He's an offensive innovator, a great play caller, a QB developer. He's also a great recruiter, especially in the transfer portal, which LSU already loves to do, but they'll want to embrace that even more. Now, some negatives. He does have a reputation for short tenures and moving on to the next spot soon. So yeah, he's at LSU, but if a better job opens up next year, do we guarantee he won't want to leave? I don't know. LSU's up there when it comes to how elite of a job it is. So I do think he will be there for at least a few years, but he has a reputation for those short tenures. And we know defensive inconsistencies. He's really going to need his defensive coordinator to step up because on that side of the ball, he doesn't really bring much. Historically, his teams have struggled defensively. Ole Miss was starting to kind of heat up the past 2 years, but that is not his strong suit at all. So he really needs his defensive coordinator to step up and be kind of that guy on that side of the ball. In the end, I give LSU an A. They wanted an explosive offense. They wanted a big name. They wanted to become national relevance again. They got that 100%. And he seems to be that new SEC modern personality. He's going to make everyone know what's going on. He's going to be flashy. He obviously already was in the SEC, and he went to the playoffs as an SEC team. He does need vast results. LSU is going to expect that. But given the fact that multiple teams were pursuing Lane Kiffin hard, and LSU came away with him, they came away with the best coach available in all of college football this offseason. LSU gets an A. Our third team we're going to cover is Florida, who brought in John Sumrall from Tulane. Sumrall has a history of building up these small programs. Obviously, Tulane, he got them to be ranked and a college football playoff appearance. And before that, he was at Troy and he got them ranked as well. He definitely has that CEO type of personality and coaching. He wants to establish a culture and discipline underneath him and let his coaching staff and his players take responsibility for a lot of stuff as he's the overseer, not necessarily a innovator. He also recruits extremely well in the Southeast. He's obviously used to the Alabama and Ellis or Louisiana, those states. But you know, if you're in those states, you're already recruiting in Florida. Now he has the Florida name and the resources as well. Some of his question marks, his coordinator hires will be key. Like I said, he's more of a CEO. That doesn't mean he doesn't know how to call plays, develop offenses, but his coordinator hires will be the make or break. He doesn't really have a big track record versus elite Power 4 teams. He has beaten Power 4 teams before, but he hasn't really had great success versus the main ones. But obviously, if your goal and his is and theirs is to bring Florida back to relevancy, you do got to win those big games. But to me, he's the Dan Campbell of college football. He's tough. He's cultured. He's the builder. He's a leader. He just needs to surround himself with the right guys. And there's no question about it. Florida might have their best coach since Urban Meyer. So I give Florida a B for this grade. The only reason I dropped it down a little bit is because you had a few other schools like an LSU, like even a Michigan, even though Kyle Whittingham wasn't available at the time, bringing in big names, and Florida's going with someone who's a little more untested at this level. But I do think Summerall is a great coach, so I give Florida a B. Then we just move a little bit over to Auburn, who's in a very similar position. They brought in Alex Golesh from USF. Golesh is a brilliant offensive mind. He's great at developing quarterbacks. We saw the leaps that Byron Brown was making over there. He has that up-tempo philosophy, that high explosive offense that I think Auburn really wants to get back to. Now, he does have a limited track record. He's mostly has recent success. His career record really is kind of what it is because of this past season, but he was building USF up. The biggest question mark is how fast can he get this done? Auburn wants immediate results. They haven't been good in a while. They really haven't had a great season since that second national championship appearance when they lost. And even that season was kind of a fluke. And not fluke's probably a stretch, but Cam Newton was their last great team. They're getting impatient. He also needs to bring in an elite defensive coordinator to bring the Auburn defense back to an elite level to compete in the SEC. But I do personally like him as a coach a little more over John Summerall. They're close, but a little more. So I give Auburn a B+, especially since they don't have as big a name currently as Florida. It's still a big name, but I think Alex Golesh is a great hire. I think it's a great schematic fit offensively for Auburn and what they want to do. He doesn't really match that big personality hire, but I think a team like Auburn, who has struggled recently, doesn't mind that as much. He has been a very good recruiter, but he needs to prove it on the national level. So Alex Golesh at Auburn gets a B+. And we're going to stay in the SEC, stealing American League coaches. We have Arkansas hiring Ryan Silverfield. Silverfield is a proven consistent winner. All he did at Memphis was win. He's a tough but fair culture developer. He's known as a very good recruiter and developer as well. He brings in a lot of those lower tier stars and he develops them extremely well, which to be honest is something that Arkansas probably needs. Their recruiting has been the worst in the SEC overall the past few years. So they need someone that can bring guys in and build them up. Now, Memphis has been extremely good since he's been there, having a 50-24 career, but they haven't really been an elite group of five team. They struggle getting big wins, especially versus the Power 4. And now he's in a very tough recruiting location. Arkansas, they have plenty of talent, but it's not like a rich talent like a Texas or a Florida. Obviously, he can expand to those regions, but recently Arkansas hasn't been able to get the top recruits out of either Arkansas or those states. So he has a very tough job recruiting ahead of him. Overall, I really do like this hire. I give it a B. He doesn't have the big upside as Alex Golesh or John Summerall or some of these other group of five promoting to Power 4 coaches that we will talk about. But I see him as someone that raises the floor of Arkansas. So while if you're an Arkansas fan, I'm not expecting to win the SEC with Silverfield. Recently, you're in that 3, 4, 5 win range. Can he get you to that 6, 7, maybe sometimes an 8 win season? I definitely think that's possible. Let him build a culture. Let him build Arkansas up to be a brand. And then if things get stagnant with him, you try to step up. And I know that's not fair to him. He might also be looking at, Arkansas is a stepping stone as well. Use each other to build each other up. But Arkansas, you don't swing for the SEC championship. Swing to be consistently not being blown out and a tough opponent to play. So Ryan Silverfield gets a B at Arkansas. Moving on to our next team, we have Kentucky. And I want you guys to put in the comments any grades that you disagree with. What would you grade your favorite coaches of your favorite teams, things you love and you hate about your new hires? Kentucky hired Will Stein, the offensive coordinator out of Oregon. He's an elite young offensive mind. He works really, really hard to get the ball to his playmakers. I know it sounds simple, but not every coach does that. He wants an explosive offense. He wants to get the ball to his playmakers. He's also well known to be a film junkie and a grinder. He is going to put all of the work in that you can to be prepared for his games. Cons are kind of obvious. No head coaching history, no ties to the SEC. He has limited recruiting ties to the Southeast. He's going to need a veteran defensive coordinator to help bridge the gap of his inexperience, and also a defensive coordinator that can handle the defense, because that's not his specialty. But this is a big culture change for Kentucky, changing from Stoops. If you're a Kentucky fan, expect big offensive improvements. He knows how to recruit extremely well. Again, he just needs to go into the different territories. I think how early he jumps on the recruiting, using his name, using his Oregon experience, will be a sign of how fast this rebuild is. But if you're a little patient, it's going to be a very good rebuild. I think Kentucky is in a good spot. Kentucky gets an A- with Will Stein at the new helm. Then we have Ole Miss. And I just realized we've done only SEC besides Michigan. I promise you, I have all the other schools in this list. I just, for some reason, put them in this order. Was not just an SEC recording. But Ole Miss is promoting Pete Golding to head coach after Lane Kiffin leaving. And there's some pros and cons for this, of course. Pete Golding is familiar with Ole Miss. He's familiar with the team. This is probably the best case scenario to keep your players and the recruits that are already committed to Ole Miss and prevent them from going to LSU or a different school. Historically, he is a very good coach. Now, he has no head coach experience. He had inconsistent success as a defensive coordinator at times. So overall success, but times where it was inconsistent. And he will obviously need to rely on an elite offensive coordinator if he wants to keep Ole Miss as a playoff caliber team. And kind of the opposite of Will Stein at Kentucky, Ole Miss probably wants results immediately because of the fact that they were just in the playoffs, or they still are in the playoffs by the time this is coming out. So they want to be good right away. So he definitely needs to get an elite offensive coordinator to help keep this team on the current trajectory. I give Pete Golding a B-. I don't love him as a head coach, but I see why they did it. They wanted to get a guy in the building immediately, both to have the best playoff success as they can, but also to have the best long-term success as they can. But clearly it's a big downgrade from Lane to Golding. So I give him a B- just because of that. Michigan State brings in Pat Fitzgerald, the old Northwestern coach. He had a 17-year career there. He was 110 and 101. A lot of those losses came in the last few years, though. Pat Fitzgerald had a long tenure of great success before that. He became known to maximizing three-star talent in the Big Ten, something that could be very beneficial to Michigan State. He's known for defense and building the tough culture, that you kind of rely on in the Big Ten. His cons, like I said, his last few years were very bad. He kind of fell off the cliff. And granted, he was at Northwestern, but still. He also has zero experience with the transfer portal and the NIL. So he does have a big adjustment in that sense, because clearly, obviously, you need to succeed in those aspects to succeed in college football. He also has a very old school offensive mind. So I'm not saying that can't work, but we'll see how that translates to the current Big Ten. I give Pat Fitzgerald a C+. I could easily see myself being wrong in this grade. He obviously had a lot of success in the Big Ten with less resources, but I think he has a very low ceiling compared to maybe some other coaches. He's more of a regional recruiting guy, lack of transfer portal and experience. If he can really dig into the transfer portal well right away, I think it's a great hire. We'll just see how that goes. Then we have Oklahoma State, who is bringing in Eric Morris. Has a long track record as a great recruiter, a QB developer, an offensive innovator. If you don't know, he was integral in helping develop and recruit Patrick Mahomes, Baker Mayfield, Cam Ward, John Mateer, and obviously Mestamaker this past year at North Texas. He just does phenomenal work with either finding QBs or helping develop, or both. He also has Texas recruiting ties also, which is extremely important if you're an Oklahoma school wanting to become an elite program, because obviously Oklahoma has a lot of good recruits, but Texas has better. Now, there's clearly defensive concerns at North Texas. Their defense was not very good. He needs to expand his recruiting nationally if he wants to take a team like Oklahoma State to a playoff contending team. He had a very easy 2024 schedule for an American team because it was last year the best Group of 5 conference, and he kind of dodged most of the better American conference teams. Not that he did it on purpose, obviously, but that's just how the schedule rolled out. They were a ranked team. They were on the cusp of the playoffs, but he did have an easier schedule. So I give Eric Morris an A for Oklahoma State. I think given the fact that they haven't really been super relevant in the Big 12 recently, even with Texas and Oklahoma leaving, I think someone that can develop this high-powered offense, can develop some quarterbacks, and has done a lot with less resources, I think he's going to be a very good hire. He needs to bring in a defensive staff, but you're going to get a fast-paced, explosive offense, and it's going to be fun. Then we have Virginia Tech getting James Franklin. I'm not going to dig too much onto this because I made a whole video when the Franklin hire happened, and obviously this is the longest hire. It was the first hire out of all these schools. So if you want a really detailed breakdown of James Franklin in Virginia Tech, watch that video. But we know he's going to build a great culture. He's going to bring stability, and he is one of the best recruiters that we see. We already saw Virginia Tech's recruiting class go from barely anything to, it might be top 25 at this point. It's trending in that direction. His question marks are in clock management and his ceiling, but Virginia Tech hasn't had that. This is going to be easily their best coach since Beamer. In worst case, you get to become relevant in the ACC again. So Virginia Tech gets an A+ for James Franklin. Like I said, check out that full detail video if you're really interested in it. UCLA brought in Bob Chesney from JMU. Bob Chesney has demonstrated an ability to build successful programs at all levels, at D2, FCS, and obviously JMU, going to the playoffs this year. He's an extremely detailed-oriented guy. Players love him. He's tough but fair. He will put all of his players into the best position to succeed. He's a great developer. He creates a structure that allows them to flourish. Now, there's some cons for him. He has no ties to the West Coast. So his recruiting, obviously UCLA is a great recruiting place, but he has no experience over there. All of his history is on the East Coast. He is a good schemer, but he's not revolutionary as a play caller or as a developer on either side of the ball. He has no Power 4 experience, so it could be a tough adjustment going to the Big Ten, and UCLA is going to want some fast results, so he's got to compete against USC, obviously Washington, Oregon, and then Ohio State, Michigan, etc. But he's going to create a culture of effort, of discipline, and detail. His recruiting will determine the speed of the rebuild, but he has been a great recruiter historically. He just needs to do it on the West Coast. UCLA gets a B+ with Bob Chesney. It's a great hire and one of the best ones they could have done, seeing that they haven't really been super relevant the past 5 to 10 years. So Bob Chesney is a great hire in Los Angeles. Staying in the Big Ten, we have Penn State, who hired Matt Campbell from Iowa State. Matt Campbell is a great coach. He's very experienced. He had Iowa State as a consistent contender. He has recruited extremely well in the Midwest and the North, so that should translate very easily into Penn State. He's known as a very stability and culture guy. Very similar to Franklin, to be honest. But he has a lot of high pressure expectations. As we know, Penn State hired Franklin very suddenly. Seeing that Franklin was the guy who brought Penn State back to relevancy after the Joe Paterno problems, and he got them to consistent 10, 11 wins, brought him to the playoffs. I know he had a really bad start to the season, but Penn State fired Franklin pretty suddenly. So Matt Campbell is going to have a lot of pressure on him to do better than Franklin. He also needs to demonstrate schematic progress on both sides of the ball. He gets kind of stagnant at times, and he needs to keep developing to keep up with the current pace of college football. So I give Penn State a B for Matt Campbell, and the grade is a little lower than the coach. I'm penalizing them because they fired Franklin early to get a head start on the coaching hire, and they got a head coach way later than most teams, and they lost a ton of recruits because of that. I'm penalizing you for the timing of it and the process of it. But Matt Campbell is a great coach. His upside is questionable, like I said, like Franklin, but the recruiting progress should continue. The wins should still be there, and Penn State will stay relevant this year. And Penn State should be very happy with Matt Campbell at helm. One of the better options in my opinion. Moving to the American Conference, we got our first Group of 5 team, USF, who is bringing in Brian Hartline from Ohio State to replace Alex Golesh. Hartline brings a lot of offensive success both as a play caller, a developer, and a recruiter. Ohio State had continuously some of the best wide receivers that we've seen ever as a school. I'm not saying it's just on him, but he's obviously a part of it. He also has a national appeal as a national champion coordinator and a wide receiver developer. So it kind of puts USF on a bigger map as a program to bring in recruits, because even though he wasn't a head coach, he was a coordinator, a play caller, and a recruiter. So if you're an offensive guy, I would want to play for him. Some of the negatives: no head coaching experience, obviously. He needs to implement structure and stability quickly while USF is on the rise. Take advantage of that momentum they had this year, beating Florida, beating Boise State in the beginning of the year, going to Miami as a ranked team. So USF is one of the hottest Group of 5 schools. Now you're going there as a well-known but unproven coach. Jump on it immediately, build your culture, build your staff, get some good recruits in there, keep that momentum so you can keep getting those great recruits. I love the Brian Hartline hire. It's one of my favorite Group of 5 hires, so I give them a B. Then we have Iowa State, who's bringing in Jimmy Rogers to replace Matt Campbell. Jimmy Rogers is coming in at 6-6 from his one season as a head coach at Washington State. Now, he did have extensive success as an assistant and a defensive coordinator, but he has very limited coaching experience in the FBS. He has a limited recruiting branch. And when he took over as a head coach at South Dakota State, they were extremely talented, and basically like everything was already there. You just had to come in and continue it. And he did that very well. He had a lot of success at South Dakota State, one of the best FCS schools in the country. But again, he didn't really build that. He just took it over. And while maybe he could just take over Iowa State and build it from there, that's not how it works anymore. A lot of those guys are already in the transfer portal. He's going to have to bring a lot of his own staff. So I give Iowa State a D for this hire. I don't think Jimmy Rogers is necessarily a bad coach, but I definitely think there's better. I know they lost Matt Campbell pretty late in the process, so that was part of it, but he's unproven on all levels. He needs to prove he can build his own team, his own staff. James Madison brings Sunbelt Billy Napier to replace Bob Chesney. Billy Napier has already had a lot of success in the Sun Belt. You know, he won 2 conference championships there. He was 40-12 there. He's a great recruiter, and he's a big name. So that should help bridge the gap from JMU losing a lot of the guys in the transfer portal. You know, he brings the big name. He brings that Florida ties. Even though it didn't go very well, he should help maintain their trending success. Now, the question marks are the offensive and quarterback development. The offense at Florida did not do good at all. And we saw guys like DJ Lagway didn't progress, even though he was the best recruit in the country when he got there. Now, he has come out and said he's giving the play calling to the offensive coordinator. He's going to let it go, but we'll see. You know, he needs to prove that he can be a CEO head coach and let the offensive coordinator and the offensive staff progress and do their jobs. He also needs to prove portal success at the G6 level, because he did have great portal success at Florida, but that's Florida. Now he's at JMU. And when he was at Louisiana, the portal wasn't a thing. So now he needs to do that. But I give JMU a B+. I do think this is one of the better hires a Group of 5 school could do. Because he's bringing that big name in. He's bringing the recruiting ties that he has. He's creating a great staff there from top to bottom. His coordinators, his recruiting staff, his quality control people. He's building a great staff. So they should help, you know, keep JMU relevant after another coaching change, after another big portal swing. So JMU gets a B+ for the Billy Napier hire. Next, we got Kansas State, who brings in Colin Klein. Colin Klein's a Kansas State legend. He's a former Heisman finalist. So that should bring in a lot of energy into the people, into the boosters, the fans. He also showed an ability to upgrade an offense at Texas A&M and got SEC experience while he was there. But he has very limited experience as a coordinator and no experience as a head coach. So he definitely needs to bring in some experienced people, like some of the other guys I mentioned, to help bridge that gap. He needs to create his own structure, his own rhythm, his own systems, you know, his own schedule. He also needs to expand his recruiting reach, because again, he's not super experienced as someone who has a lot of coordinator experience or head coaching experience. So he hasn't done a ton of recruiting. So he needs to do that as well. So for Kansas State, I give him a C+. He should be a great culture and program fit, but there's just a lot of questions on the ability to run a team, the ability to hire staff, and the ability to recruit on a national level that Kansas State should be recruiting decently well. So Kansas State gets a C+ for Colin Klein, but it is an upside hire. Cal has hired Tosh Lupo, who was the defense coordinator at Oregon. He has a lot of great West Coast recruiting. He's been elite doing that. So obviously that stays consistent there with him being in Cal now. He gives Cal a defensive identity, and he's also very familiar with big programs like, again, Oregon, and he was under Saban for a while. He also has experience in the NFL. He needs to hire well on the offensive side of the ball, as he doesn't have any part of that, and he has no head coaching experience like a lot of these coordinators don't. So it'll be an adjustment period for sure. But the defensive identity and culture should help keep Cal in most games. Defense travels, defense can be consistent. His upside could be limited unless he gets a great offensive coordinator and a great coaching staff around him. But I do think for Cal, this could be a great hire, so I give them a B. Stanford brings in Tavita Pritchard. He has deep Stanford roots. He knows the athletics, but also the academic expectations that Stanford has that makes Stanford one of the harder places to coach at, because you got to balance both of those aspects. He's a proven QB developer and offensive guy. He worked with Luck. He worked with a lot of their QBs in the past. He also has experience working in the NFL with QBs. Like a lot of these guys, no head coaching experience. It's going to be an adjustment period. He will also have to judge the toughness of the new experience of being a head coach, while also recruiting and the portal limitations that Stanford has. Because like I said, you have to recruit both athletically and academically more than most schools. So he fits the culture you'd want, but it's going to be a tough and long rebuild. Because of the inexperience, I give Stanford a C for the hire, but I do think this could turn out well for them. I do think it's an upgrade, but it's not going to be an easy time. It might take a few years to really get the ball rolling. Colorado State hired Jim Mora, and I love this hire. He's a veteran head coach with both college and NFL experience. He has a proven track record of rebuilding tough and physical teams, both at the Power 4 level with UCLA, in the Group of 5 with UConn the past 2 years. And so he sneakily got 9 wins out of UConn back-to-back seasons, which no one really expects that from UConn. So he's shown the ability to improve less talented teams. He does have a mixed record of improving QB play, and he hasn't demonstrated great offensive success and innovation. He gets his teams playing tough, physical football. I give Colorado State a B+ for this hire. He should also be able to tap into the Cal recruiting that he developed when he was at UCLA. And I definitely love the upside of him as their new head coach. So I give Colorado State a B+ for Jim Mora. Oregon State then hired Jamarcus Shepard, who was the wide receivers coach at Alabama. He worked under DeBoer for the past 4 years. He's a high energy, great motivator, loved by all his players. He will bring that energy. He will bring just the effort. Players love him. He does have a very good track record of developing wide receivers. We saw what those wide receivers coming out of Washington were like. Bama has some really good receivers, obviously. He loves an explosive passing game. Now, the downfall, not only does he not have any head coaching experience, but he has extremely limited play calling experience as well. So it's not like he's an experienced coordinator like some of these other hires. He's very unexperienced. So he needs to prove himself in that aspect drastically. He also needs to prove his ability to recruit a whole roster versus just a passing attack. You know, he needs to, even if just the offensive side of the ball, and let his defensive coordinators recruit that side. He needs quarterbacks, linemen, etc. I think with his energy, I think with him being under DeBoer for a while, I think it's a pretty good hire for what Oregon State could have gotten. So I give them a B-. Not a great hire by any fact, but it definitely could have been worse. Speaking of worse, we have Charles Huff being hired at Memphis. Now, he has proven an ability to turn multiple G5 teams into much better teams. You know, we saw Southern Miss get better. We saw Marshall do really well. And he has recruited well and used the transfer portal for quick success, quick turnarounds. But I feel like he leaves programs very fast. Obviously, Southern Miss, he was only there for 1 year. Marshall, he was there for a couple years, but he got them to the Sun Belt Championship and then left to go to a team also in the Sun Belt. So I have questions about him actually building cultures, and Memphis just came from one of the best culture guys with Ryan Silverfield. So I give Memphis a C. Now, should he actually stay there and keep good success and stability and maintain a culture, I think it's much better than a C. But I worry about him continuing to look at new coaching searches new coaching jobs, trying to use every single school as a quick stepping stone versus building something there. So Memphis, I give him a C for Charles Huff because of that aspect, but he is a pretty good coach. Then UConn hired Jason Candle from Toledo. He was extremely successful in the MAC. He has a long track record of building teams in different eras he's tested. He coached in the transfer portal and the NIL era. He might not win at a high level, but he wins every single year. Now, he has no experience recruiting in the New England area. So now he's recruiting in a new area, in an area that isn't as talented as Ohio in the Midwest is, but he also has very poor resources. UConn is a place that, while they could have a lot of resources and they have high expectations, they typically don't invest in the football team much. But I think UConn losing Jim Mora was really tough, but bringing in Jason Candle is probably one of the better realistic ways to replace him. So I give them a B. I think he'll be a very good match for how the program and the systems are there. You might just need to be a little bit patient because it is UConn. Then Toledo replaces Jason Candle with Mike Jacobs. Mike Jacobs will help keep this program strong with consistency and stability, and you're maintaining that recruiting pipeline that was built at Toledo. He had a very good record as a head coach in the D2 and FCS levels, going 94-23, but he has no experience as an FBS head coach. So again, while he's familiar with Ohio, he has a limited recruiting span there. So he's kind of relying on Jason Candle's pipelines and recruiting track record. But I do think it's a very good hire for a school like Toledo, replacing a guy that's been there for so long. I give them B-. Good track record of winning, but the upside is unknown. And it's just kind of hard to replace someone like Jason Candle that was your longtime coach that has so many winning seasons. But I give him a B- for Mike Jacobs. Then Utah promoted Morgan Scalley into their head coach. He started with the Utes as a grad assistant in 2006 and has been there ever since. So he's going to maintain that Utah culture, that defensive foundation, and it should help maintain some player stability. All the players there have known him since they've been there, because obviously he's been there so long. So they'll be less tempted to follow Whittingham to Michigan or transfer out because they're so familiar with Scalley. The big question mark remains offense. He's a defensive guy. He's been a defensive guy his entire career, and he has no experience as a head coach. So he never had to, watch out for the offensive side of the ball. So we must hire and empower a great offense coordinator to keep Utah at an elite level. But I gave Utah a B for the hire. They're a school that probably could have gone out and got a experienced and well-established head coach. They've been one of the better teams in the Big 12 for a while now, or I guess they were the Pac-12, now Big 12. But they're a team with some juice in them, but they decided to go to the internal route. It's a clean and obvious succession plan. You wonder about the upside with the offensive and defensive philosophies of his coordinators, But I give Utah a B for Morgan Scalley. So then Tulane hired Will Hall, and Tulane comes in with a lot of expectations. Obviously, they went to the college football playoffs. They've been one of the better group of 5 teams recently. Will Hall has a very good offensive background and should help maintain the offensive success Tulane has had in the momentum that they built in that department. But there's a lot of big expectations for someone who has struggled massively at the last head coaching position. He needs to prove he can handle the NIL and the portal since Tulane is losing a lot of their guys. He has to retool fast. He's a big risk, and it will depend if he can maintain an elite offense with a lot of these guys leaving. He does know Tulane and New Orleans well, but he was 14-30 in his 4 years at Southern Miss. I don't love the hire for a team that was just in the college football playoffs. I'm giving Will Hall my worst grade of the day as an F. And I hope for you, Green Wave fans, I'm wrong. I don't want to see a small school like this suffer, but I don't love the hire. I think you could have found a better solution, a better replacement. I give him an F. Then Washington State brings in Kirby Moore. He comes from a family tree of very good coaches. His dad, Tom Moore, and his brother, Kellen Moore, who a lot of you probably know in the NFL. Kirby has a very clear offensive identity. He has a history of building up QBs and building very good offenses, which if you look at the glory days of Washington State, whether that's John Mateer, Cam Ward, or even going back to Gardner Minshew, that's kind of how they are when they're at the best. He also shows he's very serious with roster building, putting a lot of time and effort into building the best program he can through the transfer portal and recruiting. Like a lot of these inexperienced guys that are on one side of the ball, he needs to bring in a very serious defensive hire to win those tough games. You can't just outscore everyone. Washington State also has obviously a very clear record recently of not maintaining key players. And while that's kind of just how it is with group of five nowadays, it's been pretty bad for Washington State. So I give them a B-. I think he brings the right culture and identity. The staff and roster volatility is kind of the biggest barrier. Can he keep his guys on his team? But I think as a coach, he does fit Washington State very well. Southern Miss brings in Blake Anderson, who is they're 23 and 17 in 3 years at Utah State. And he has a 74 and 55 in 11 years as a head coach. He's an experienced winner and builder, clearly doing it in multiple schools. He is an in-house hire, so he brings in some stability. His offensive credibility will help stabilize the QB play there and help make it a consistent and well-running offense. Southern Miss has a lot of proud fans and a school and boosters that actually do expect a lot. They expect bigger than the resources allow. So he needs to recruit very aggressively into SEC country to rebuild. And in fact, rebuild probably isn't the term that school wants to hear. They want to hear retool. They expect results pretty fast for a smaller school. But with him being in-house and adding his experience, it should be better than a total reset. They just got to nail the portal for some of these key positions. The roster turnover will probably determine the upside, but I give Southern Miss a B for the hire. I like Blake Anderson a lot, to be honest. Coastal Carolina brought in Ryan Beard from Missouri State. As you probably know, Missouri State went from FCS to FBS. They got 7 wins in their first season. That's pretty good. Ryan Beard he's young. He brings a lot of energy, and his creativeness is perfect for Coastal Carolina. He fits them very well. But Coastal is a team that was used to being one of the better Sun Belt teams. They had a very down year, so they expect to be competitive right away. So he needs to be kind of quick. He's going to be judged. You can't rebuild the school. You got to retool it. He also has no recruiting ties to the East Coast. But I do like Ryan Beard. He had a very successful transition at Missouri State. I give him a C+. I think the recruiting could be tough, but he should build the right culture and systems, but his upside will be tied to that recruiting, like I said, in the portal. Then North Texas brings in Neil Brown to replace Eric Morris. Like I said earlier, Eric Morris was one of my favorite hires, so Neil Brown's going to have his job cut out for him. Now, Brown did elevate Troy to a top Sun Belt school, demonstrating roster building and team building and just building the right culture. I've said that a lot today, but that's just kind of how football is. You got to build those proper structures to have consistent success. He will have a challenge coming to North Texas after they developed such a key identity of big offense, of these high power plays, of the QB play, right? But he should translate pretty well with a good recruiting area in Texas. He has experience recruiting in the Southeast. He just needs to keep an identity and retool versus rebuild. But I do like Neil Brown a lot. I give North Texas a B for the hire. Then we have UAB, who brings in Alex Mortensen, who was their interim head coach. He has 9 years total on the Alabama coaching staff, so he's experienced, but not quite as a head coach. He brings a modernized offense and stability to the locker room with him being the interim head coach after the firing of Trent Dilfer. He brings in a lot of Power 4 experience, like I said, but also some NFL experience. He just needs to prove he's different from the last coaching staff with his portal decisions, with his roster building decisions. He needs to prove he's not Trent Dilfer because he's the interim, so obviously he has connections, but he needs to prove his own identity. I give UAB a C+. I do think they probably could have gotten a little better, but also could have been a lot worse. They didn't finish the season off very well with him, but they got a big win versus Memphis. I do think with the right staff hires, being bowl eligible consistently is definitely doable, but recruiting momentum versus the SEC will be the biggest factor probably.